For 20 years, I believed the red brick house at the end of Hawthorne Lane in Bath belonged to the life I had built with my husband, Daniel, and nothing about it felt temporary. I knew the sound of every loose stair after midnight, the way the conservatory glass trembled in heavy rain, the patch of kitchen tile near the aga that always stayed colder than the rest, and the exact angle of late afternoon light that stretched across the hallway photographs each autumn. It was the house where I brought home both my daughters wrapped in hospital blankets, where Daniel painted the nursery a clumsy cream and got more paint on his shoes than on the wall, where Sunday roasts turned into laughter, arguments, apologies, birthdays, grief, and all the ordinary moments that quietly become alive before anyone notices. After Daniel died of a sudden cardiac arrest 5 years ago, this house stopped being just an address and became the only place in the world that still felt like his voice might travel through it. I kept everything running the way he liked it. At first a hedge-trimmed square, the garage shelf labeled in his handwriting left untouched, the old radio in the utility room still tuned to the station he played on Saturday mornings because routine was easier than admitting I was alone. I paid the council tax, renewed the boiler cover, fixed a leaking gutter, replaced a cracked pane in the upstairs study, and told myself that keeping the house standing was the same thing as keeping the life we had made from collapsing altogether. So when the truth surfaced, it did not feel like paperwork. It felt like a betrayal with walls around it. It happened on a wet Thursday in November, the sort of day when the sky never properly brightens. I was in the loft, sorting through boxes, because my eldest, Sophie, had been after me for months to clear space before Christmas. Most of what I found was useless school reports, moldy holiday brochures, a broken lamp, a showbox of tangled charging cables none of us needed, but behind a stack of old curtain rods was a leather document case I had never seen before. That alone unsettled me, because Daniel was not a hidden box sort of man. He was methodical to the point of irritation. Everything had a place. Every receipt was folded, every manual filed, every mortgage statement clipped and dated. The case was stiff with age and smelled faintly of dust and cedar. Inside were neatly arranged documents, insurance papers, a valuation from years ago, and beneath them, in a sealed transparent sleeve, a transfer deed for the house. At first I thought it must be an outdated copy from when we were mortgaged. Then I saw the date, 18 months before Daniel died. Then I saw the names, his name, and another one below it, Eleanor Whitmore. I remember sitting back onto the loft boards so suddenly I knocked my shoulder against a beam. For a few seconds my mind simply refused the information in front of me, as if my eyesight had betrayed me and the letters might rearrange themselves if I blinked hard enough. But they stayed where they were. Eleanor Whitmore, joint beneficial interest, supplementary declaration attached. I read every line once, twice, then again aloud, hearing the legal phrasing turn strange and monstrous in my own voice. According to the attached declaration, Eleanor Whitmore held a secured 50% equitable interest tied to funds advanced towards structural repairs, mortgage arrears, and capital improvements. In plain language, another woman had a claim on my house and my husband had signed documents formalizing it. There was a witness signature from a London solicitor's office I had never heard of. There was even a notation indicating the deed had been registered correctly. I came down from the loft with the file pressed so tightly against my chest my arms ached. I did not cry straight away. The first feeling was not sadness. It was humiliation. Not because of the money, not even because of the legal threat, but because a whole piece of my marriage now sat in my hands like evidence in a case I had not known I was part of. That evening I said nothing to my daughters. I made tea, answered a text, folded laundry, and moved through the house as though nothing had changed while my thoughts splintered in every direction. Was Eleanor a mistress? An old Yankee? Someone Daniel had wronged? Someone who had helped us and been erased from the family story? By 2 a.m, I was at the dining table with the lamp on, the deed flattened under a mug, searching through old bank files and handwritten notes. The year on the document corresponded with the year the rear wall had to be underpinned after subsidence damage, the year the roof was stripped and rebuilt, the year Daniel insisted we could manage without selling. I remembered the strain on his face then, the way he became short-tempered whenever money came up, How he told me not to worry because he was sorting it. At the time, I thought he meant over time. Maybe a private loan, maybe savings from somewhere I had forgotten. Never this. The next morning, I rang the land registry helpline, then the local conveyancing solicitor, then the firm named on the papers. By noon, I had confirmation that the filing was genuine. Not a forgery, not an administrative accident. Genuine, valid, and still attached to the property record. The solicitor in London refused to discuss the original instructions without formal authority, but confirmed the deed had been executed in person by Daniel and another party. I asked whether spouses were normally told about such matters. He answered, with professional caution, that many things should happen in families and yet often did not. That line stayed with me because it sounded less like law and more like judgment. I spent the next 3 days reconstructing a version of my own life from records Daniel had left behind. Hidden among archived statements was a series of large transfers entering our account around the time of the house repairs. They had come from a private account under the name E. Whitmore. There were also 2 check stubs in Daniel's files marked only repayment pending and extension agreed. The more I found, the less room there was for denial. By Sunday, I had an address in Cheltenham. I drove there without telling anyone, past rows of Georgian terraces slick with drizzle, rehearsing angry speeches that dissolved each time I stopped at a red light. Eleanor Whitmore lived in a narrow cream townhouse converted into flats near Montpelier Gardens. She opened the door herself. She was perhaps 10 years older than me, elegant in an unshowy way, with silver threaded through dark hair and the kind of stillness some people have only after surviving something difficult. The moment she looked at my face, she knew why I was there. That, more than anything, took the breath out of me. She did not pretend confusion. She did not ask who I was. She simply said, "You found it," and stepped aside. Her sitting room was lined with books and smelled of bergamot tea. On the mantelpiece was a framed photograph of a much younger Daniel standing beside a girl in school uniform, both squinting into sunlight. Eleanor saw me looking and said softly, "We grew up on the same road in Bristol." I stayed standing. I told her I wanted the truth and not the softened version people tell widows because they think grief makes them fragile. She nodded as if I had said something reasonable. Then she gave me a story I had not prepared myself to hear. She and Daniel had known each other since childhood. Their mothers had been friends. They lost touch for years, then reconnected by chance at a fundraiser in London when Sophie was still in primary school. According to Eleanor, by then she had built a successful property consultancy business, and Daniel, desperate, proud, and terrified of losing the house after the structural damage, went to her privately for help. Not once, but several times. She lent him money in stages, first to stop the mortgage default, then to pay for underpinning, then for roof work and legal fees when the insurers disputed liability. I asked why I knew nothing about any of it. She gave me an answer that made me angrier because I knew at once it was probably true, because your husband was ashamed. She showed me signed loan schedules, bank transfer records, emails printed and dated, and one handwritten note from Daniel that I recognized instantly from old birthday cards and lunchbox notes. In it, he thanked her for saving the house when I could not bear to tell Claire how bad it had become. Claire, my name in his hand, my humiliation made visible. Eleanor said she had originally expected to be repaid within 2 years, but delays, interest pressure from her own business commitments, and Daniel's repeated reassurances dragged matters out. Eventually, her solicitor insisted on formal security. The deed, she said, was never meant to dispossess me. It was protection in case he died before settling the debt. And by the time he finally promised he would tell me everything, he had already become ill. She had not contacted me after the funeral because she saw 2 terrified daughters, a woman barely standing through the service, and decided that forcing a legal claim then would have been cruel. Instead, she waited, hoping the matter might be addressed through Daniel's estate. It never was. "I never wanted your home," she told me. "I wanted the truth to be dealt with properly. He left both of us holding different pieces of it. I wanted to call her a liar. It would have been simpler if she had been monstrous. But she wasn't. She was measured, tired, and carrying her own version of Daniel not as husband or father, but as the boy she had once known and the flawed man who had relied on her discretion. I drove back to Bath in silence, passing the turning to our old secondary school, then the supermarket where Daniel used to buy too many biscuit.